Anytime.
All right, cool. Marshall, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
My pleasure. It's great to be on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into your good work, I want to know first and foremost, this pandemic was a big deal 4.5 years ago or so. We really had to pivot. There was a lot of changes, a lot of things that influenced our worlds. How much of living and surviving through that period has influenced the way that you do work and live life today?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll start from the work standpoint.
Yeah,
It really enabled us, well, it forced us to do things differently than we had been doing.
yeah,
And, I think the single biggest change, if I had to look back on it, is the use uh, of digital communication, so Zoom.
yeah.
And we were doing, but just to give you an example, we had been wanting to do more telehealth because we have patients from all over the state of Michigan. And, it's inconvenient for them to come for visits, and a lot of that can be done by telehealth. And, but we were using that in about 2% of our visits. Uh, During the pandemic, we got up to 25%, and we settled out around 22%, which is, I think you can't do that for everything, but many people, physicians, nurses, care providers, and patients, importantly, really appreciate that flexibility.
Yeah, I know I did. I mean, because there's a part of it where you have to get loaded up and you have to drive, and then just that whole thing. It's like it just kind of streamlines everything if you can do it on a screen.
Absolutely. And we have, like a lot of medical centers, we have parking problems and trying to navigate your way around it. So
Yeah,
it gets rid of a lot of that as well.
absolutely. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do right now in 2025. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids. It's career day, and one of the kids in the back of the room is curious and is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Well, I spend my time doing both healthcare. I'm a cardiologist and I see patients, but I also spend a lot of my time trying to work with our great faculty and our great staff to try to be sure that we keep our focus on providing the very best care for patients. So at the top of our pyramid, everything is about, are we providing the people who come to see us for health reasons uh, the kind of care they need? And we are also moving much more into preventive health. I think that's an area in healthcare that we've not put enough attention to. So to your class, young man or young woman, the things that you hear about exercising, about eating healthy foods, not ultra processed foods, trying to stay away from the uh, Cheetos or whatever the popular brand is these days. Uh, those things are very important. And the more you do that, the healthier you're going to be. And exercising, as I said, exercising. So it's a great career if you like working with people and
Yeah.
if you like interacting with people. I think this is and if you like science and like the idea of understanding health, uh, you got to think about a career in medicine, some part of medicine.
Yeah, for sure. So when you were in the third grade, when you were a kid, did you always dream about being a doctor?
No, my sister sent me some old family photographs. Our parents died a few years ago, and she was going through it, and had one of me as I don't know, about a third grader. I had my cowboy hat on, my boots on. I dreamed about becoming a cowboy, but it
Yeah,
didn't work out.
yeah. Well, take me back to your childhood. Where were you born and raised, and what were these seeds of becoming a physician? How were they planted, and how did they evolve into who you are today?
Well, I grew up in Austin, Texas, when Austin was a much smaller city, about
Yeah.
180,000 when I lived there through high school. And well, I loved sports. Um, my distant relatives, several generations back, had moved to Texas from Germany when they were basically giving away land. So my grandparents still had a ranch there, and I loved going there. That was kind of where the ranch theme came in.
Yeah.
As I went along, I found that I did really like science, and thought about, well, uh, could I be a doctor? Because there were doctors in my family. In fact, one of the people who influenced me was my maternal grandfather, who turned out to have gone to medical school at the University of Michigan. I didn't know that before. I mean, I knew that sort of, but I'd never been to the state of Michigan until I came here for this role 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So he was kind of a combination of a very jovial guy, but also, pretty could be pretty intense. And
Yeah.
I like that. And he was really good at explaining things.
Yeah.
So that caught my attention.
Isn't that funny how life goes full circle, how those things kind of happen? And that's wild. So, talk to me a little bit about the passion for getting into it. Getting into medicine's hard. There's a lot of schooling, there's a lot of pressure, and I know we fictionalize it in shows, but I think there's a lot of truth and literature and things that are out there. How did you get through that stress period to like groom yourself to get into this world?
Well, for me, um, part of it was the whole process of getting admitted to medical school.
Yeah,
That can be quite a chore. But once I got in, um, what I loved about it, it was really hard work. In medical school itself, and then being an intern and a resident and a fellow in cardiology, um, was long hours. But the greatest thing for me was the people that I worked with all kind of shared the same vision. I mean, we went into all different areas, but
yeah,
they shared the vision that it was a privilege to be a professional, a privilege to be a doctor, and we all worked hard. It was sort of like, I guess, being in the armed services or being in a fraternity. I mean, we and most of us, at our core, were pretty driven. Now, today, for example, at the University of Michigan and most places, medical schools have realized that my phenotype isn't the only phenotype out there that would be good in relating to patients. A lot of patients they don't want to relate to me. They want to relate to somebody who seems more like them, whether it's their ethnicity, whether it's their approach to life. And so we now do what's called holistic selection. So in my day, it was how good are your grades, how good are your test scores. That was it. And as long as you didn't look like a psycho on your interview, you would get into medical school.
yeah,
Today, it's much more how has your life led you to this point? What have you done? What what have you done outside of medicine? And so, for example, our entering medical school class is the number of science majors is about 25%, which in my day it was about 95%.
sure.
And there are people who've done all kinds of interesting things. Um, the average age of medical students these days when they enter, rather than being fresh out of college, most people have been out for a year or two. They've done something else.
Yeah.
Um, so, it's evolved, and I think what I'd say to your elementary school class is that we need all kinds of people, and I see this when I see a physician, and I see this when I'm rounding. One of the most interesting things that happened to me pretty early in my career was that um, I was in Galveston, Texas at the time, and we had a number of very uh, diverse group of residents. And I was with a family, an African American family, and I was talking to them, and they weren't looking at me. They were looking at one of the residents who was a smart young African American guy, and they said, "Well, what do you think?" And they really wanted to connect with somebody that they thought had their life experience.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I work in technology, and when I fix things, I work in school districts. When I fix things, there's almost this, oh my God, how did you do that? It's amazing. And it's like, I've been doing this for so long, I'm just used to it. So I'm wondering in biology, when you're doing very intricate, small things that save lives, have you just gotten to a point where it's been um, who's the author for economics where he said 10 after
Oh,
10,000 hours you become an expert. It's
yeah,
going
I'm
to come
blanking on the name.
it's going to come to me. But anyways, how do you approach that mindset of going in and doing this for so long? Does it change? Does biology change? Is everybody different? How does that work when you see the heart and you see the inside of a body?
Um, well, it's really changed. Um, I will say that the change has gotten faster and faster, but
Yeah.
uh, there's been change. But a lot of the principles of talking to people and listening to them with a stethoscope and physical examination have not changed. And there's sort of a comfort with that. So
Yeah.
I don't know how many uh, tens of thousands of uh, new patients I've seen over the years, but those are still the same. And people talk a lot about AI, and I'm a big fan of AI,
Yeah.
but I don't think AI has that human connection. So the human connection part remains. What has been fun for me as a cardiologist, heart specialist, is to see how quickly we've developed new therapies. So when I was in my training, if a person came in and had a heart attack, we put them in a bed and we watched them, and uh, they were in the intensive care unit, and we did the best we can. But there were no real specific therapies for people with a heart attack. Then came these clot dissolving drugs, and now if you have a heart attack and you get to the hospital quickly, we can open up the vessel that's clogged and really prevent almost all the damage. We have great drugs for lowering cholesterol and for controlling blood pressure and also taking some stress off the heart. So there's a whole panoply of approaches today that just weren't there when I started in cardiology almost 40 years ago now. So that part has been fun, and I'm sure there'll be more.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Um, my wife had a hysterectomy in September, and I was talking to some people, and they were like, "Yeah, I remember when when my wife had that in the 80s, it took almost 6 months to fully heal. She was up and going within a week. I mean, not fully, but she was on the mend and could go back to work within a few weeks. It's amazing the advancements in the age that we're living in with the medical advancements."
Truly, truly is. Um, sign of age uh, uh, and my doing too many slam dunks and hanging onto the rim
Yeah.
in my dreams.
Yeah.
I had to have a hip replaced, and
Yeah.
it's a same day procedure. Went home the same day,
Wow.
and then another I think real positive trend in medicine is that in those first couple of days after surgery, a physical therapist came to my house, got me up and going around, and really, and the hip had been just painful. And within a week, I was getting around just fine.
Wow.
And boy, a hip surgery used to be 2 or 3 weeks in the hospital, and uh, just just these advances are great.
Yeah. Yeah, they certainly are. So let me ask you this. Who's been that inspiration, that heroic kind of force for you in your life for the work that you've done?
Well, I'll tell you somebody. There have been many. I've been fortunate to have many great role models,
Yeah.
many great. We didn't call them mentors in the day, but people that were really mentors.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you one particular example, but he represents many. There was a cardiologist when I did my training and was on the faculty at uh, the Massachusetts General Hospital named Roman DeSanctis, and he was a phenomenal person, phenomenal uh, doctor and cardiologist. And oh, at least for 10 years after I left, if I had a difficult question and I didn't know what to do, I could call him up pretty much anytime, night or day. He'd take the time to go through with me what was going on and why, what I thought was the best thing to do. And sometimes he'd say, that sounds right. And sometimes he'd say, well, I might do things a little bit differently
Yeah.
in a very kind way.
Yeah.
So, but there were many people like that. And then there
Yeah.
were other people that uh, were in that did cardiac procedures, and I was doing cardiac procedures at the time, who they were just amazing.
Yeah.
Cardiac procedures, you have to be able to see things in 3 dimensions, which
Yeah.
you're really seeing them in 2 dimensions. So you have to understand them in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
And some of those folks, I think, could have been, I don't know what, fighter pilots or astronauts, or they had that 3 dimensionality that was really amazing.
Absolutely. So what has been the consistent thread line for you to wake up every day to do this work, to look forward to it, but to also evolve as a human being and a family guy and everything that you've got going on in your life? What is that collective energy every day for you?
Well, I think it's driven by many things, but at the end of the day, it's driven by uh, the people I feel like we have a chance. And when I say we, I mean our whole health system, but we have the chance to help.
Yeah.
And there are lots of people that need our kind of help. So that's what gets me up in the morning. Um, you mentioned your wife. I've been married this year will be 44 years.
Yeah.
And my wife is, uh, who also was a physician we met around healthcare, although she's retired for about 10 years now. She kept me so grounded, and I'm so grateful. I have to tell you, 25 years ago, our kids were small. We have 5 kids. Uh, well, maybe 30 years ago, they were small. And uh, she'd say, well, you're going to come to the class play, or you're going to go to the softball game, or you're going to go do this. And I'm like, man, I am so busy. I just can't do it. And she was like, let me rephrase that. You're going to the sporting event, or you're going to the school play. And I'm so grateful for that because I think it's so easy. I don't know about you, but it's easy to get tied up in work and think that's so important. So I think having a life partner of any sort who can help you balance that.
Yeah.
For me, it was invaluable.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, in all the years of work that you've done on patients, what's been your best fan letter, best like response that you've gotten from a patient that was unexpected?
Uh, I've had a bunch. One of my favorites was a person I took care of who, um, this was, oh, it's at least 20 years ago, who really had a rocky course. There were two of them.
Yeah.
One of them really had a rocky course and came back for the first clinic visit. And this was a woman, she had not knit, she'd taken a sweatshirt and embroidered it with "Don't worry, be happy," and had a nice image on there. And I thought, wow, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Um, Another person uh, who really got me interested in um, reading thrillers. Um, he was a guy who he would have been a perfect John Grisham character.
Yeah.
He was an attorney. He worked for the FBI, alcohol, drugs, divorce, bankruptcy, and he'd had a rough time, but he was working his way back. And he had heart problems, and so I saw him every few months. One time he came in and he said, "Hey, do you know John Grisham?" And I'm thinking, I mean, John Grisham was pretty famous by then,
Yeah.
but I wasn't doing any reading. And I said, "Well, is he a patient here?" And he said, "No, he's an author." He said, "I'm bringing a book to you next time we come." And he brought to me The Firm,
Yeah.
which was that made into a movie with Tom Cruise. And I'll tell you what, I was hooked on John Grisham. I've read everything the guy has written
Yeah.
since then.
That's
So
awesome.
those are two examples.
Sure.
Guy brings me a book. A woman brings me a cool sweatshirt.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and you ran into that version of you right before you started really practicing on patients, and you could give advice to that younger version of you based on this life you've loved, the wisdom you've gained, what advice would you give that young version of you?
A couple of things. The first is I would say, don't forget you have a life outside of your job.
Yeah.
Um, the second is that, and this is something that would have been very helpful to me. Take care of yourself. You can't take care of anybody else, your family or your patients or anybody else if you don't take care of yourself. And so for a lot of years there, I didn't get enough sleep. I was eating, I was going for the sugar high whenever I had a chance.
Yeah.
I got chubby and I wasn't happy about that. But I was in that cycle where got to grab more caffeine, got to grab more whatever.
Yeah.
And uh, so it took me decades to get off of that.
Yeah.
But I think, for everybody, I think saying, well, you can find some time to exercise. And I always felt like, well, if I don't have an hour to go to the gym and really work out, it's not going to work. But our hospital has innumerable flights of stairs that I can take all the time instead of waiting for the elevator. And it's a long, long corridor. And if I go back and forth, I mean, I don't get in 10,000 steps every day, which by the way, the benefit of about 4,000 steps is not very much. So
Yeah.
if you can walk 3 or 4,000 steps, that's great. And
Yeah.
so you can get that kind of exercise just in your day-to-day work.
Absolutely. So after this long career in medicine and everything that you've accomplished, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Um, I think that I'm the proudest of, and it's not, I'm going to say I'm proud of it, but it's really a very much two-way street. I've had some great people that I had the chance to work with and help them develop their careers. And many of them have, not because of me, but just they got off on a good foot, have been very successful in their careers. And the ones that I'll say I'm most happy about are those who have succeeded in their careers, but also succeeded in their life. I've got a couple of people that I'm working with now that I've worked with for a number of years, and One of them reports directly to me. And so every year at our annual evaluation, I say, well, okay, tell me what you did. Did you take any time off with your wife and daughters? If you didn't, it's going to be the big X mark there, which I don't really do. But he's gradually moving along. And in fact, I saw him not too long ago. And he said, "Hey, guess what?" And I said, "What?" He said, "We scheduled a trip to Italy." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "My wife and both the girls who are college age." I said, "Well, that is awesome. You're getting an
Yes.
A+ review this year."
That's awesome. So, as a big sports fan, I'm curious, what is one of the most intense, memorable games that you've ever attended?
Uh, well, I'm a limited sports fan.
Okay,
So I grew up in Austin, so I've always been a big Texas Longhorn fan.
gotcha. Okay.
Uh, and then I wasn't anywhere that had a great football team till I came to Michigan. So I'm
Yeah.
a big Michigan fan.
Yeah.
And then I like basketball, particularly from UNC. I was at UNC for a number of years.
Okay.
So I think um, I'm not going to get it quite right, but it's these games where the team that I was rooting for was way behind
Yeah.
and somehow miraculously recovered. And one of them was a game where Vince Young was still the quarterback at the University of Texas. And
Yeah.
I think they were playing Kansas or Kansas State, one of them. And
Yeah.
Texas was down. It was a year that they ended up having a perfect season, but they were down by, 20 points with that not that much time left.
Yeah.
And that guy just, it was like fourth and forever. And he ran, got a first down. Texas ended up winning. And I still get kind of misty eyed thinking about
Yeah.
that game.
Yeah. Those are
I
good
love the
ones. Well,
comeback.
yeah, totally. And I'm in Kansas City, so that's all we've ever done. I mean, that's what the Chiefs did all year. I've
Yeah.
seen the Royals, it's like it's just they're never in the lead and they always have to scrap it back,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, even though the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl, I mean, they've been great.
Yeah, I am just so relieved that the noise and all of that is over with. The Taylor Swift thing, just
Yeah. Yeah.
just
That must
all
have been
of
a trip.
yeah, just the predictions and are the refs cheating? It's like I'm ready for baseball. I'm ready for a little bit of quiet, so
Yeah.
it's good. And I think they just reported a spring training this week, so it's good.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So where did they do their spring training? Florida or Arizona?
They're in Surprise, Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Have
that's
you ever been? One time I went to a spring training game. It was so great.
Man, I haven't. And I talked to someone down there in Arizona recently, and they were like, you have to come. It's like, because I've never been to opening day. I really need to go, but it's that feeling like it's total rebirth. Like the idea of spring, just everything coming together, and the birds are chirping, the sun's out, winter's over. It's like the ultimate feeling of redemption, Phoenix rising.
That's awesome. You ought to go.
I know, I totally do. I'm convincing myself right now as we talk. So I'm curious, at the end of the day, everyone out there has a perception of you as a physician, as a family guy, all of these things that you do with your life, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, well, and I'm not trying to sound self-effacing. I really don't like, I mean, I'm okay with it, but I don't thrive on the spotlight.
Yeah,
And so I like working in a high functioning environment where I don't have to be the spotlight.
yeah,
And I'm very happy about that. And the uh, when I'm together with our family and our kids and our 7 grandkids, then I can just be. I mean, I can be more like I was when I was in high school or college. I
yeah,
can just hang out.
absolutely. Marshall, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. I always find souls like yours that have dedicated your life to literally saving lives and rerouting our biological outlook is such a inspirational thing. And I know that you guys are grounded and you don't want the spotlight, but I'm just always so appreciative of the work that you do. I mean, you could have chosen to do anything with your life, and you've done something that's absolutely admirable and wondrous. So thank you for taking a minute out to open up your world.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's a real pleasure having a chance to get to know you a little bit, and thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you. Take
Take
care.
care. See you later.